The young and the restless spoilers Mariah had never felt so disoriented in her life. The events of the past few days had felt like a blur, a chaotic whirlwind she couldn't quite grasp. She had woken up in a strange bed, the faint smell of unfamiliar cologne in the air, a heavy weight in her chest. She had tried to recall the night before, but her mind betrayed her, shrouding everything in darkness. Who was he? The man she had spent the night with? Mariah's heart raced as panic began to take root. She couldn't remember his face, couldn't remember the words he had spoken. All she had were fleeting, fragmented images, shadows that taunted her with their vagueness. The only thing she knew for sure was that he was gone. But something in the pit of her stomach told her that this wasn't over. Mariah's anxiety twisted and turned inside her, gnawing at her insides like a relentless predator. The man she had been with, the one she couldn't even remember, was searching for her. He was coming for her, and that thought terrified her beyond measure. Her hands shook as she stared at herself in the mirror, wondering who she had become. She couldn't even look at her reflection without seeing a stranger. A woman whose actions she couldn't justify, whose decisions had spiraled her into something she didn't understand. What happened to me? She thought. What did I do? She couldn't remember the night clearly, but she could feel the weight of it pressing on her every thought. She needed to get a grip on herself. She couldn't keep running from this. She couldn't let her own mind trap her in this fog of confusion. But the fear kept coming, relentless, like a dark cloud threatening to swallow her whole. People around her didn't understand. They looked at her with pity, with confusion, and some with judgment. Why did you do that, Mariah? They asked, as if her actions were easy to explain. As if she could just wake up from this nightmare and go back to the person she once was. But they didn't understand the overwhelming fear, the desperation that had driven her. They didn't understand the weight of the silence that had consumed her after she had walked away from something she couldn't remember, a mistake she couldn't take back. And now, she was alone, scared, and spiraling deeper into her own mind. The man who had shared that night with her, that nameless face, that faceless memory, was out there. Searching for her. Watching her. The sound of a knock on the door broke through her thoughts, pulling her back into reality, or what was left of it. She froze, her heart skipping a beat. The knock was followed by another, harder this time. It wasn't a random visitor. It wasn't just anyone. Her breath caught in her throat as she heard a voice, low and smooth, cutting through the silence like a knife. Mariah, he said, his voice sending a shiver down her spine. It was a voice she knew. She knew it too well. Mariah, open the door. We need to talk, he continued, his words laced with a false sweetness that made her skin crawl. The familiarity of it made her stomach twist. She didn't want to open the door. She didn't want to face him, didn't want to look into those eyes. The eyes of the man who had changed everything, who had taken something from her and left her drowning in confusion. Her hand trembled as she reached for the door handle, the fear coursing through her veins like ice. She didn't know what she was afraid of more, seeing him again, or the knowledge that he was already inside her thoughts, hunting her from the shadows. Mariah's mind flashed to a moment, a fleeting recollection that made her body go cold. The details were hazy, but she saw it. A man, older, distinguished, with silver hair and a dark, imposing presence. She had been drunk, lost in the haze of a night she couldn't remember, but that image, that shadow of a man, lingered like an unfinished sentence. She gasped, her chest tightening. He was here. The man from her memory. Mariah, I know you're in there, he said again, this time the sound of his voice more insistent, more urgent. We have unfinished business, don't we? Unfinished business. The words echoed in her mind, sending a wave of panic crashing over her. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't think. She stumbled back from the door, her back hitting the wall as the weight of the moment settled on her. She remembered now. The man wasn't a stranger. He was someone she should have recognized, someone she never should have let into her life. But she couldn't place him. Not fully. Not yet. The door rattled again as the man outside pressed his weight against it, demanding entry. "Mariah," he called out once more, his voice smooth but growing more sinister. "I won't let you hide from me. Not anymore." She tried to scream, but no sound came out. The walls around her seemed to close in, her breath coming faster, more erratic. Who was he? The question repeated in her mind, relentless and cruel. She was trapped in a nightmare with no escape, with no way of getting out. Tears welled in her eyes as she collapsed to the floor, her body shaking with fear. What did he want from her? The door slammed open, and the man stepped inside, his face now fully visible. Mariah's breath hitched as she looked up at him. The recognition hit her like a bolt of lightning, but it wasn't the comfort of familiarity she had hoped for. It was the horror of a truth she had tried to bury. The man who stood before her wasn't just anyone. He was someone with power, with influence, someone she had once trusted, someone who had once been a part of her world. But his face, now twisted with a cruel smile, showed no trace of the man she thought she knew. He was no longer a friend, no longer someone she could trust. He was her nightmare. "I hope this works with what you were envisioning. It's designed to keep the tension high and maintain suspense throughout the unfolding of Mariah's psychological crisis and the mysterious man's pursuit. Let me know if you want me to adjust or expand any parts." Mariah's descent into chaos and confusion deepens, and as she drifts further into isolation, the situation becomes even more unpredictable. The end of her relationship with Tessa has left a void, and without the comforting presence of Sharon or Tessa, Mariah is left to wrestle with her own demons. Their departure from her side, though possibly a result of their own lives and struggles, is a betrayal in Mariah's eyes. She is alone, and it's not a state she can manage for long. The absence of the people she once leaned on makes her feel exposed, vulnerable to the forces that are already closing in on her. Whispers about who the mysterious man might be are inevitable, and Genoa City's underworld is quick to speculate. Ian Ward and Ben Stitch have come up repeatedly in conversations, their names shrouded in criminal history and treachery. However, the problem with such theories is that these men are far too dangerous and cunning to make their presence known in Genoa City so openly. They wouldn't risk drawing attention to themselves in such a conspicuous manner. Their motives are complex, and it's clear they have no intention of reappearing in such a blatant way, knowing that their actions would be closely scrutinized. But the real question remains, if not Ian or Ben, then who is the man tormenting Mariah? Who is the one who knows her so deeply yet remains a ghost in her life, leaving only the shadows of his presence to haunt her? There's a possibility that the man is someone who Mariah once trusted, someone she never thought she'd have to fear, but who now stands as a dark figure in her life. He's the kind of person who plays on Mariah's vulnerabilities, using her fractured memories and her deep-rooted insecurities as leverage to gain control over her. The man could very well be a new antagonist, someone from her past that she's reconnected with unknowingly, or someone with connections to the darker, more corrupt corners of Genoa City. The question of Mariah's fate becomes chilling when one considers the worst possibility, that she will be kidnapped again. This time, it might not be for the same reasons as before, but the intent is just as devastating. Kidnapping her, spiraling her into a new crisis, and then playing with her emotions and mind could be the very weapon this man uses to keep her in a constant state of fear and vulnerability. The consequences for Mariah would be dire. The psychological torment she would endure is something that no one should ever have to face, especially not alone. The emotional and physical scars would last far beyond the event itself, deepening her trauma and ensuring that the man would always have a hold over her. Sharon and Tessa's absence is another blow to Mariah. While they may not be deliberately abandoning her, the feeling of abandonment is undeniable. Sharon's motherly care and Tessa's unconditional support had been anchors for Mariah, but now they are gone, possibly due to their own emotional baggage or even fear of Mariah's emotional state. This only serves to amplify Mariah's feeling of being isolated, with no one left to protect her or give her the strength she needs. This entire situation could spiral into something far more sinister than anyone initially anticipates. The possibility of kidnapping and even the possibility of much darker forces at play can't be ruled out. This man may not be someone like Ian Ward or Ben Stitch, criminal masterminds from her past, but a more subtle predator, someone who knows exactly how to break Mariah and push her to the edge. What does the future hold for Mariah? Will she be able to survive this latest round of torment? The most logical next step would be for her to find a way to escape, to regain control of her life before she becomes the puppet of a shadowy figure who wants to dominate her. But will she have the strength, the allies, or the will to fight back? Or will she be trapped in a cycle of fear and manipulation until the man gets what he wants? This story isn't finished, and it won't stop here. The pain Mariah feels isn't just about a single night or a fleeting memory, it's about a life that's been turned upside down, filled with psychological warfare that will leave lasting scars. The question remains, who is this man, and what does he want from Mariah? Whoever he is, he's someone who knows how to get under her skin and play on her worst fears. He will not stop until he gets what he wants. The secret that Mariah carries, one that she is too ashamed to admit, has silently corroded the foundation of her marriage with Tessa. There's a guilt that hangs over her like a shadow, one that she can't shake off, even as the relationship with Tessa has begun to fray at the edges. Tessa, with her boundless love and support, has tried to understand, but she's only gotten so far. She's made guesses, attempted to piece together the puzzle of Mariah's behavior, but there are gaps that Mariah refuses to fill. The truth remains locked away, and it's eating her from the inside. It all began one fateful night, one where Mariah stepped out, consumed by a need to forget, to escape her own spiraling mind. She drank too much, as if the alcohol could drown the guilt, the confusion, the sense of having lost herself. In the haze of inebriation, a man appeared. He was older, far older than anyone Mariah would have ever expected to be with. His face, unfamiliar at the time, seemed distorted through the lens of her drunken haze. In the stark light of morning, however, the clarity returned, and with it, the horror of what had transpired. This man, older than most people in her life, looked like someone's grandfather, someone she never imagined she would be attracted to, let alone sleep with. The age gap between them was enough to make her skin crawl, even now. But what haunted Mariah more than the physical age of the man was the fact that she couldn't understand why she had been drawn to him in the first place. It wasn't a mere lapse in judgment. It was something deeper, something inexplicable. Even now, when she tried to examine the events through the lens of sobriety, she found no answer that made sense. The memory of his touch was enough to make her shudder, but that wasn't the worst of it. The worst part was the realization that this man wasn't just some random stranger. He wasn't someone from her past she could brush aside as a fleeting mistake. No, this man had connections, deeper, darker connections that Mariah was afraid to confront. He was someone tied to the religious cult she had been a part of, a cult led by none other than Ian Ward. Mariah's involvement with Ian Ward's group was something she had long kept buried. She had walked away from the cult, or so she believed, but the shadow of her past lingered, always hanging over her, even as she tried to carve out a normal life. But what had happened that night, the man she had slept with, the shameful truth was that he was likely a member of that very group. This wasn't just a personal betrayal, this was a betrayal of everything Mariah had fought to leave behind. Her secret was more than just an affair, it was a collision of her past with her present, a stark reminder that no matter how far she ran, her past would always have a way of catching up with her. It wasn't just the sexual encounter that haunted her, it was the deeper, darker implications of her involvement with the cult and what it meant for her future. And for her relationship with Tessa. Mariah was torn between the intense shame she felt about the affair and the deeper shame of what that affair meant. To admit it would be to expose herself in a way she wasn't ready for, not to Tessa, not to anyone. She feared that by acknowledging her involvement with Ian Ward's cult, she would lose the love and trust of the people who mattered most to her. But it was more than that. It was a crisis of identity. The guilt she carried wasn't just about cheating on Tessa. It was about her own lack of control, her submission to the darkness of her past that she had tried so desperately to escape. Tessa could sense that something was wrong, but Mariah kept her distance, unwilling to open up. The silence between them grew, thick with unspoken words and unshed tears. Tessa's love, though unwavering, could only stretch so far without the truth. But how could Mariah explain something so shameful, so deeply tied to her own vulnerability and the traumatic grip of her past? She couldn't bear the thought of Tessa looking at her with disgust, seeing her not as the woman she had built a life with, but as someone broken, someone who had been lost to something she couldn't understand. In the darkest corners of her mind, Mariah feared that Tessa would leave her if she knew. It wasn't just the affair, it was everything it represented. It was the reality that Mariah had never truly left her past behind, that she was still tethered to it in ways she couldn't even begin to explain. The man she had slept with wasn't just some unfortunate mistake. He was a remnant of that past, a reminder of her entanglement in a world of manipulation and control. Tessa, in her attempts to support Mariah, would never know the full extent of the horror that Mariah had been hiding. To her, the affair might be something to forgive, something to heal from. But to Mariah, it was a reflection of a deeper truth, one she couldn't admit, one she couldn't bear to confront. The shame was too much. And that shame would be the thing that ultimately destroyed her relationship with Tessa if she didn't find a way to overcome it. But how could she? How could she break free from the chains of a past she had no control over? In the end, the true horror for Mariah wasn't the act itself. It was the realization that her past, her darkest secrets, were never truly gone. They were still there, lurking in the shadows, ready to pull her back into the abyss. And now, with the man from her past possibly re-entering her life, she would have to face the consequences of what she had tried so hard to escape. Would she finally have the strength to confront it, or would it tear her apart forever? This version expands on Mariah's internal conflict and the deeper, emotional layers of her situation, blending her psychological trauma with the complexities of her past. It highlights the moral and emotional struggles she faces in a relationship strained by secrets and unresolved issues. Let me know if you'd like further adjustments or expansions.